What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, I got so many mailbag questions. At John Middlekauff is my Instagram. I was like, you know what? We've had a busy day. We've put out a lot of stuff. But let's do a mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your question answered here on the show. And I wanted to start with this question because I thought it was fascinating. And I thought it was an excellent kind of thought provoker. And it was, would you rather have Howie Roseman or the best NFL coach if you were starting a franchise? And I thought about it because I saw this question in my inbox probably yesterday. I think it's a little like quarterback, right? I think you could argue that Myles Garrett, like if you're just looking at like, this is a question over a period of time, but let's say Myles Garrett was younger. He's a better player than, I don't know, if there are 32 starting quarterbacks, 28 of them, right? That's how impactful he is. Yet, you would probably take 10 quarterbacks over him. Maybe even more. Why? Look at the Browns. They got him, and as Kevin Stefanski says, he's the defensive player of the year in perpetuity. He's clearly the most dominant, unstoppable player, right? When he tries and is healthy, he can't be blocked. Even Jordan Mailata, who joint practiced against, when the Eagles joint practiced against the Browns, said their offensive line room was laughing about how good he was. Like, it was stupid. Yet you wouldn't take him over, obviously, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Herbert, Burrow, if healthy, that crew. But I think you could argue the next tier of guys. Because you can have a great pass rusher, but if you have no quarterback, you got no shot. Howie's an elite general manager. And I think there are other guys that would fall into this category as well. But you would take an elite head coach. I think anyone in this scenario would take the coach, the top coach, in any era. Andy Reid, Bill Walsh, you name it. I think you would take the top 6 or 7 coaches, and specifically in for this exercise, the offensive ones that call plays, their value's really high. So you got Andy Reid, you got McVay, you got Shanahan. I mean, these guys are proven winners, right? I think the thing with LaFleur, you'd go, well, the Packers, the organization, that would be up in the air. Sean Payton, it's pretty powerful to have that guy. Harbaugh, while he doesn't call plays, like he's kind of proven now wherever he's going, he's winning. Wherever he's going. So I would throw him in that mix. But then there would be guys like Dan Campbell I like a lot, but how much, it was a partnership with Brad Holmes, right? Brad Holmes is clearly picking the players, right? And listen, this is where the Sirianni thing, no one, if you had to choose with the Eagles, Howie Roseman or Nick Sirianni, it would be, there wouldn't be a soul that would choose Sirianni, right? But that's more of an indication how great Howie is. But I think you would take a lot of coaches, and I think Howie'd be the first to tell you that, they spend a lot of money on assistant coaches, right? They have, from Doug to Nick, those guys are probably more plug and play type coaches, but they are spending premiums. Jeff Stoutland makes a ton of money. He's the highest paid offensive line coach in the league. Vic Fangio makes a ton of money. So they pay premiums for certain individuals on the staff. So you can't, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I think there'd be, the number would be under 10, but there would be way more than one coach going before Howie was picked. Great question. Why do offensive coaches seem to not give a shit about special teams? The Rams and Niners in particular have lost multiple games the last few years due to what seems to be an indifference to that unit. Giving up not one, but 2 blocked field goals to lose a game against a team you were working in the first 65% of the game. And then McVay talking about offensive mistakes instead of how dog shit his field goal unit was doesn't make any sense. I'll never doubt him, but he and Shanahan and others, quote unquote geniuses, they care more about they need to care more about special teams. Do you think they're just arrogant or don't practice enough? I think it's simple. Is these guys care about schematically drawing up the offense, And they like defense, right? Both those two guys, for example, Jared Verse, Nick Bosa, Michael Williams, Brandon Fisk, like they invest resources into they value the defensive line really highly, which I respect. That's, the older version of them, Andy Reid, has always been like that. Cares about the line of scrimmage and specifically defensive linemen. I think there is a nature to defensive coaches that you utilize a lot of their guys on special teams, right? To open field tackle, to shed blocks. And I think that element of football, defensive guys gravitate more towards special teams because there's a physical nature, there's a tackling nature, separate from the kicker and the punter, who most defensive or offensive coaches aren't necessarily relating to. I don't think it's an arrogance. I think I don't relate to that style of football. And I don't take it seriously in the sense of I don't like it, right? And I can't even fake it. And both those guys are good examples of, Kyle said this offseason. I'm sure McVay has talked about it. I don't care what you say. The most overrated thing, and you learn this as you get older, are words. Like, I've seen from Maria, she's like, I take nothing seriously until we get pen to paper on a real estate transaction. Right. And like you can say anything about anyone in business, but it's like, well, is the deal signed? Is it done? And so many of these coaches like, I care about special teams. And then I watch your units are terrible year in, year out. Yet a lot of these defensive coaches, their special teams units, typically are good. Why? Because what do they practice more often? Probably tackling. that mindset, it like the coach is there. If you went to a special teams practice, and I've never been to a Rams practice, but I've been to my fair share of Kyle Shanahan practices. He doesn't pay attention. He does not give a shit, and he can't fake it. Which I respect as long as you admit, like, yeah, I don't care. I don't know anything about it. We got to pay a special teams coach a lot of money to handle that, and I think they attempted to do that this year. The Rams before they had Bones back in the day, who was pretty good, but I don't know. I think they just can't relate to that unit as human beings. And it starts with the kicker and the punter. I just think they hate those two positions. They think it's such a waste. It's like, that's the game, guys. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. The Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app has new promos every day. We talk a lot about football on 3 and Out, but there's always something to bet. Yesterday was table tennis. It's wild. Thousands and thousands of people betting on live table tennis with a no-sweat bet open. Up the app today and see what promo you get. Week 4 doesn't kick off till tomorrow. But if you haven't tried your first bet on Hard Rock Bet, there's still time to get 150 in bonus bets if you win. Just place a $5 bet, and if it hits, you get not only your winnings, but 150 in extra bets. And since today is Wednesday, if you're already betting on the Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook app, you know what that means. It's the last day to use your legendary rewards drops. Open up the app today. You could have a bonus bet, or who knows what is in there. More drops every Thursday. The rewards and promos are nonstop. Question for the mailbag. Has Russell Wilson played himself out of Hall of Fame contention since leaving Seattle? I just don't remember a guy's career going from such stardom to so much negativity as this player, right? Typically, it just ends. You get old. Manning, Roethlisberger. It's like no one's really Breeze. People will forget that last year, them struggling to throw, right? You just remember the good times, how great they were. But you look at Russell Wilson. Someone pointed this out to me the other day. He's been to 10 Pro Bowls. 10. Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's been an All-Pro, obviously a Super Bowl champion. He's led the league in passing yards and passer ratings and passing touchdowns. Like, he's had some legendary seasons. If you just watched him from an eye test standpoint, he had just 2025, 34-8, 34-11, 35-7, 40-13. Like, he had some massive years where he was just one of the most dynamic players in the league. But I think 2 factors. Felt like the team didn't love him. Felt like the best players on his team, I don't know, resented him. And then Pete and John completely turned on him. And then obviously the way these last 3 or 4 years have gone. I would say in the peak of his powers, he was undoubtedly a Hall of Famer. But if you look at the total body of work, I just think, like if Eli Manning's going to get in, then he's got to get in. And as someone pointed out, well, if Matt Stafford is in the conversation, then Russell Wilson has to get in. So I think he ends up getting in. I do. I've always said this. I'd have no problem if we didn't let any of them in. Like it'd be like Rodgers, Brady, Manning, Mahomes, like Marino, Elway, Montana. I'd keep my list. Favre. My list would be short. You'd Aikman, Young, like you'd have to like check every box. But that's not the way it is. They let in too many guys, in my opinion. It should be a lot of Deion Sanders and Lawrence Taylors and Ed Reeds, but we've diluted it a little bit. And that's my respect to how great the elite guys are. They shouldn't have to share that room with other people, but they do. What a performance by the Lions. Question for the mailbag. Dan Campbell and Sirianni were both mocked for their opening press conferences and ranked behind coaching hires like Arthur Smith, Urban Meyer, and Brandon Staley. They have taken teams into Baltimore and physically beat up the Ravens. Both have gone into Arrowhead and won, and both are perennial powerhouses. And both do this with quarterbacks most people don't think are that good. I know they don't have the long resume yet, but it's hard to argue a coach like Mike Tomlin is better right now. I can argue that Campbell or Sirianni could have gotten the Ravens or Bills over the hump by now. I think Reed, McVay, and Kyle are by far the top tier, but it's hard not to put them in the mix with the Harbaughs, Pete Carrolls, Sean Paytons. Where would you rank them based on how the coaches are right now? I think when we talk about Goff and Jalen, the argument more is like, especially with Jalen, should he be in the top tier mix? And I think any logical argument is he's not as good as those guys, though he's winning. I think that's fair. And I think same thing with Goff, though both guys can beat whoever they're playing on any given week, and their teams are really good. I do think what, and I said this last night, what Campbell and I'd say Brad Holmes have done, the Lions were like the losingest franchise of the 2000s. You couldn't have lost more games than them. The 2010s, even with Stafford, Ndamukong Suh, and Calvin Johnson, they were awful. They had a well under 500 record. So those guys got there and resurrected this franchise. Now, the Eagles had hit hard times for like a year and a half and had Howie Roseman, an established guy. And I'm not trying to diminish Sirianni, but I would take Campbell over Sirianni if all things are equal. Now, if I get Howie Roseman, sure. I mean, I can take any coach. That's what it feels like. So I think comparing Sirianni and Dan Campbell, even though Sirianni just won a Super Bowl, everyone wins with Philadelphia. Chip Kelly, who I think is not a very good, football coach, would not want him to be my offensive coordinator. I didn't love that hire by Pete Carroll, but he won 20 games in 2 year stretch with the Philadelphia Eagles. People win with Philly. Owner pays. Just an incredible organization. It's like if John Harbaugh got fired next year, whoever came into Baltimore is going to win. You know why? You win. Now, where I do agree, like Dan Campbell is definitely better right now than Mike Tomlin. I would take Dan Campbell over Mike Tomlin. And I think it'd be hard to argue. Sirianni is just winning at a really high clip. I do think there's more variables working for Sirianni than some like the Lions owner just turned 100 today. Martha Ford. Like it's not. I wouldn't call it the most dynamic organization in the league. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie's writing checks. They're manipulating the salary cap to load their roster. But I hear what you're saying. I think it's part of the society we live in too. Like who's hot, who's not. Um, I think Jim Harbaugh is like validating how well it's going. But Jim Harbaugh wins. Should anyone be shocked that he's winning? Right? He's an elite coach. He would win with any GM. Like to me, that's powerful. So you could argue, beside Andy Reid, who has 2.5+ decades of winning, the guy that you feel the most confident if you had a coaching draft would be Jim Harbaugh, number 2. I think Andy Reid would be universal the number 1 pick. I think if you wanted to have the highest floor, it'd be Jim Harbaugh. He's won with everybody. Random quarterbacks at Stanford and Michigan, Alex Smith, Kaepernick. You give him a good one, Herbert. Shit. How many games has he won the last 2 years? He won 11 last year. He's got 3. He's won 14 games. in what? He's won 14 or 20 games since he got back in the NFL. Urban Meyer got to the NFL. He didn't even make it halfway through the season. They said, pack up your shit and leave. You suck. Hard to forget, like, I'm less emotional about Urban now that he's not coaching anymore. But he did shed the stink of that Jacksonville situation. No one brings it up. Think how embarrassing that was. It's what, like, you lose games, people lose games. You have a bad season, you have a bad season. They cleared out his locker in his office before the season even ended. It was that bad. He was that big of an embarrassment. He was that over his head. Jim go back and forth, no problem. Would you rather be the GM of the Chiefs or the Ravens? Not including the coaches. Chiefs defense is awesome, but their offense is questionable, and the Ravens are the opposite. Thoughts? Two tough divisions. The Ravens division is technically easier. So if you just factored in 100% football, you would say the Ravens. The Steelers are, I mean, a year away from Rodgers retiring, and who even knows how actually good he is. I mean, we're going to see him play Minnesota this week. That could not go well. They have a bunch of older players. That's a powder keg waiting to blow up. The Browns, I mean, the best player beside Jim Brown in the history of the franchise is going to be like 35 years old by the time they figure out their quarterback situation. That organization's a mess. And the Bengals are just the Bengals. And now their quarterback is missing another season. So I think from a football divisional standpoint, you would 100% pick the Ravens. From a personal standpoint, if money was equal, I would much rather live in Kansas City than I would Baltimore. So, I mean, both are cold, but I would Kansas City. I've lived there before, and I've lived down the road from Baltimore. I'll choose Kansas City every day of the week and twice on Sundays. Both places care about football. I feel like, uh, yeah, I would choose Kansas City from a personal standpoint, assuming money and power and all that stuff was the same. The other thing with rosters is like you have Lamar and you have Patrick under contract, but rosters are pretty fluid in the NFL. Within a couple years, like how many guys on this Chiefs roster and how many guys on that Ravens roster will still be there? And the Ravens probably have a couple more high end defensive guys. You got Roquan, you got Kyle Hamilton, you got uh, the Clemson corner, Wiggins. He's not going anywhere. But I mean, a lot of those guys you'll cycle through. Chris Jones will be gone. Travis Kelsey clearly will probably retire after this year. So I think unless you're looking at like the Lions roster, which clearly these guys are going nowhere for the foreseeable future, NFL rosters are changing. Do I have my first round picks? How much cap space I'm going to have? Those things always factor in. The other thing is the Ravens. Andy will buy sweet players in free agency. Like he'll be aggressive. It's not really an organizational philosophy of the Ravens. Occasionally, like they trade for Roquan and then sign him, but they usually let guys walk, and they're big on drafting and developing, probably as much as like the Packers. They're like the bigger market version of the Packers. They're huge on letting guys walk, getting comp picks, and then drafting. And they've historically been a pretty good drafting team. What's up with the Lamar gargling? I'm a Steeler fan, so I get it. I might be biased, but I feel like I'm constantly watching excuses made for Lamar after losing big games. He had a losing record in the playoffs, and he never seems to beat the Chiefs or the Bills, even in the regular season. He beat the Bills last year in the regular season, kicked their ass. But I hear what you're saying. If this were basketball, the media would be killing him like James Harden or Embiid or Paul George. I think the main difference is let's use Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid doesn't play in regular season games. Like Paul George, these guys miss a lot of time with injuries. And Joel Embiid has never been to a conference finals. Paul George, I guess he has in Indiana. James has. Now James is terrible in the playoffs, but I hear you. I think there would be some of that. I think Lamar Jackson is way more likable than James Harden and Joel Embiid, dramatically more. Like no one's ever said you're fat. And if anything, Lamar's like, I looked a little slow, so I lost some weight. Embiid's like, I'm in the best shape of my life, and he's out of shape. It's like, what are we doing? Obviously, his body's left him now, and James Harden to me is. Uh, I've actually seen James Harden live. I remember in a playoff series, like the first year the Warriors won the championship, they were playing him when he had Dwight Howard. He was actually pretty good. I remember being in game one and he was just hitting these step backs. I'm like, this fucking guy's pretty good. But over ever since. I mean, he's been horrendous in the playoffs. I hear you. I mean, you got to win. One thing he's benefited from that, like that Josh Allen just hasn't. His defense has been dominant. When you watch his defense the other night look like that, you're not used to seeing that. He's not used to having a bad defense. He's used to having the best defense or one of the best defenses. So, like, and he has a high level organization. Like Lamar has a lot going for him, but he's also a pretty special player. Now, for his standards, wasn't very good the other night. Missed some open throws, ran into some sacks. Uh, he was shitty. I don't know what you want me to tell you, but more often than not, he's pretty good. He hasn't won in the playoffs, right? And that's why I've always said, like, I had Josh Allen ranked above him before last year. Josh's been good in the playoffs. Lamar hasn't, and even last year, like he was good in one half. So I hear you. There's definitely a Harden esque element to Lamar. I just think he's more like. I think he's just easier to like. Some people are just likable. Some people are not. Like I just think Joel Embiid is not very likable anymore. The Minnesota Vikings will represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. They have one of, if not the best rosters in the league, alongside top tier coaching, scheme, and defense. If quarterback play can just be middle of the pack with the weapons they have, the Vikings will make it all the way. Thoughts? That's a pretty big question mark. Okay, they have this rookie quarterback who could not play last year, comes this year, has played 8 quarters, 7 of them have been atrocious, and is now injured. They are rolling out Carson Wentz, who I get it, they just won a game by a lot, playing Jake Browning. He has started 6 years, 6 different teams. So not exactly the model of just stability with him. So I think they got a lot of moving parts at the quarterback position. Is JJ McCarthy good, and could they win big games with Carson Wentz? I think we don't know the answer to that. Don't dispute anything else you said. But we all said that coming into the year. Roster sweet. That's why a lot of people that have hit me up about, Sam Darnold. I think I don't know if I got this question with Sam, but someone sent me a DM like the Vikings are dumb. They should have just kept Sam Darnold. I get he was bad those last couple weeks, but he is so much better than their situation now. And while I agree, Sam Darnold is dramatically better today than J.J. McCarthy. The chances J.J. McCarthy will ever be as good as Sam was last year and is currently playing for Seattle is probably slim to none. But they would have had to give him a big contract, and they wouldn't have signed the guys they signed. So it was a cost benefit analysis. Do we want to invest in Sam Darnold? We already have this rookie quarterback on the roster, and then not fill our roster up with better players. Or let Sam walk, go all in with JJ, get some backup quarterbacks, figure out a veteran backup quarterback behind him, and load up our roster. And that's what they chose to do, which I can't hate on. Because there's no guarantee giving Sam Darnold with the roster that they would have had to play with, given the money he would have taken, could have won playoff games. Because they didn't last year. And it would have been very similar. So they took a risk, which I respect. Is a risk going to work out? Time will tell. But it's pretty risky when 3 weeks in, when it's like, well, got Carson Wentz and JJ's hurt again. Even you guys have to admit, if you're a Vikings fan, like it's cool. I mean, our team's legit. And if we had a high level quarterback, we'd probably win the Super Bowl. Right? If I gave you like Dak Prescott, you'd be like, we're gonna win 15 games. But it's like, what's it gonna look like even this week? I think you could beat the Steelers. I actually love the Steelers until I realized that was an international game. Because I'm like, oh, the Steelers are an underdog at home? And then someone's like, no, they're in Dublin. I'm like, don't like it as much anymore. Okay, a couple more. Big fan. In this age of no acknowledgement for bad takes, I highly respect for you owning it when proven incorrect. I specifically tuned in today to see if you would address your criticism of Johnny Morton. I don't have a question. Just want to say the 3 and out, very entertaining. I don't get paid to be right or wrong. So it's like my job's to entertain. And I'm just an opinionated guy. I don't ever make up takes. I thought it was very logical to go, this Johnny Morton experiment could not work. And after week 1, you're like, God, this could be weird. And you watch him the last couple of weeks, you're like, especially on Monday Night Football, calling plays that looked exactly like Ben Johnson. What was I supposed to say? Great job by Ben Johnny Morton, but watch out, he's gonna shit the bed over the next. Like, no, I don't care. I don't understand why people get so tied to takes. This isn't like your job doesn't depend on being right or wrong, right? We're all gonna miss things. We're all gonna have opinions and theories on things that are true and are not true. And listen, does that mean Johnny Morton is the next Andy Reid? No, but he called an incredible game. I mean, the trick plays, the goal line touchdown, handoff to the Amon-Ra St. Brown, and who knows? Maybe they had that play, and if you're a Lions fan, maybe you guys have run that before, some version of that. I feel like you have. But the coaching detail to that, where Jared Goff handed the ball to St. Brown vertically so he could pitch it instead of having to work it into his hands, that level of detail, like they're a well run operation. And I saw this clip from Dan Campbell. He's like, guys, I don't think you guys quite understand our best players. So he's saying who? Sewell, Goff, St. Brown, Gibbs, Laporta, Aiden, Branch are our hardest working players. This is sports is never that complicated. If your hardest worker, I saw it with the Warriors when I lived in the Bay Area. Like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond, those guys were grinders. And then when they got Kevin, like all he did was want to play basketball. I saw it with the Giants, with Matt Cain and Madison Bumgarner and Buster Posey and Hunter Pence. It's like championship teams, usually high level players, the best players. We saw a dynasty for 20 years. Who's like the hardest worker in the league? Tom freaking Brady. It's like shocker. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady are all time greats. They're also like absolutely obsessed with football. You know, so it's like they've done a really good job of building that team with high level guys that love football. And you know, Johnny Morton, he does have a blueprint these last couple of years of the plays they've run. Now, you never know like the right time to call him, but he was pretty dialed in the other night. I don't see how there would be any other take. I even thought when Colin came out based on the Hall of Fame game that they looked kind of discombobulated. I thought that was a little too premature. I'm like, I take nothing away from the Hall of Fame game. But then the preseason kept going, and then the week one happened. I was concerned. But that was a coaching clinic from Dan and his two coordinators. Because Dan sets the tone of we're going to show up in this ring and we're going to fucking hit you right in the square in the jaw. And I dare you to swing back. Because if you swing back, we're going to swing again 3 more times. Multiple more jaw shots, uppercut, and then a kidney shot. I dare you to swing again because we plan on, and that's what Dan Campbell brings, like what Jim Harbaugh brings, the fighter mentality. And then if his coordinators are right, as they were last year, sky's the limit. Now, obviously, you know, football's a one-game situation. You have a bad playoff game, you lose, and they lost to Washington. But the team that we saw last night, if that team, now it was hard because they were missing a bunch of bodies on defense in the playoff game, if I remember correctly. But if the Lions play like that, they're a threat to win the Super Bowl. I mean, I think we'd all agree. Okay, last question. Do you think the NFL would ever explore a rule on game-winning tying field goals? I feel like kickers are going to be able to hit from further and further out in years to come if the current trend keeps going the way it is. It takes some fun out of the game. Basically, one chunk play from the offense, and they're in position to win a game. Seems kind of crazy. I I think maybe something like no game tying or winning field goals from longer than 50. Is this crazy? We will end on this. I still don't feel like you're a lock to hit field goals. You know, especially as the early in the season, there's no weather. As the season goes in these outdoor stadiums, especially in the Northeast or in the South where it rains and the wind, in the Midwest where it's freezing cold, it is much more difficult to hit field goals. Obviously, in controlled environments in the dome. Now, one major factor was it Bates last night? You kick it out of bounds, like you get a little too cute with the kickoff. They get the ball at the 40-yard line. So if you have a guy that can kick a 60-yard field goal, I don't have to get very far at all. So you kick it like, if anything, it puts an emphasis on kicking it in that window and tackling the guy somewhere around the 20-yard line because it can be done. The Rams were doing it all game. I forget what they call it. Like they had a name for it. Greg Olson kept saying, but it's the emphasis on special teams. So I have no problem because for every Brandon Aubrey, I've seen a lot of kicks missed. We still see extra points missed every single week. Butker missed a kick on Sunday Night Football. Like people miss kicks. So I hear you. Like it's tough to lose a game on a game winning field goal, but there is I don't know something exhilarating about even like a 45-yard field goal. You can block it. I would say one of the coolest plays in this. I would put punt there too. A blocked field goal or a blocked punt, and when the defense picks it up and starts going the other way, that's as entertaining of a play as there is in football. So I don't know. I mean, how could you ban a 25-yard field goal if you're down 2 points? I got to try to score a touchdown. Like what? I'm not with you on that. I hear what you're saying. I get the logic on it, but I'm cool with the way it is right now. And I think we're a little numb. These guys have longer legs, not like actual longer legs, but being able to kick it longer. I don't think there are any law like Brandon Aubrey might not miss, but a lot of guys can 52-yard field goal in November in Cleveland or Baltimore or Chicago, wind and it's cold. They are no lock to make it.